When people look up at the
Artlist.io.
sky, they see the moon, the sun, and the stars. They are curious to learn more about these things in the sky, so they try to make tools to help them see them better. One of these tools is called a telescope.
Music
Many
licensing
people worked hard to invent
reimagined.
and improve telescopes throughout history. Some of these inventors were small engineers or people who made glasses, while others were very important figures in the history of science. Long ago, there were three famous philosophers from ancient Greece named Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. They laid the groundwork for many fields of study like astronomy, the study of stars and
Artlist.io.
planets, biology, the study of living things, mathematics, politics, and philosophy, thinking about big questions. Their ideas and teachings have influenced many people and are still important today.
Mozi was a philosopher from ancient China who lived around 470 BCE.
Music
He believed in the
licensing
idea of
reimagined.
undifferentiated love, which means loving everyone equally. This idea was different from Confucianism, which was another popular philosophy at the time. Mozi's teachings inspired a movement called Mohism, which had a big impact on Chinese society for many years. Mozi wasn't the only one who talked about how light behaves. In Greece, there was a philosopher named Euclid who lived around the same time. Both Mozi and Euclid described something called the camera obscura. This is a phenomenon where light passes through
Artlist.io.
a small hole and creates an upside-down image on the other side. This discovery was an early step in understanding how cameras work.
The famous Greek mathematician Euclid, who lived around 325 BCE to 265
Music licensing
BCE,
reimagined.
wrote about how light behaves. He talked about how light reflects and refracts, which means how it bends when it passes through different materials. Euclid wrote about these things in his book called Optics, which is one of the
Artlist.io.
earliest Greek books on how we see things. In Optics, Euclid explains how objects look different depending on how far away they are and from what angle we look at them. He also wrote another book called Catoptrics, which is about how mirrors work. He proved many theorems about where images appear in mirrors, like
Music
flat mirrors and
licensing
curved ones.
reimagined.
However, he also made a mistake about how light behaves in curved mirrors. Despite this, Euclid's work laid the foundation for understanding light and vision, and he's often called the father of geometry because of his contributions to mathematics.
Artlist.io.
Long ago, there was a man named Hans Lippershey who made glasses in Germany and the Netherlands. He made something amazing called a telescope. A telescope helps us see faraway things, like stars and planets. Hans Lippershey was the first to make this special device, and he got a patent for it, which means he owned the
Music
rights to it.
licensing
He was quicker than two
reimagined.
other scientists, Zacharias Janssen and Jacob Medius, who also tried to make similar inventions. Hans Lippershey's telescope had two important parts. The part you look through, called the eyepiece, and a special mirror that helps you see faraway things. This mirror was made of brass and had a hole in the middle to fit the eyepiece. This telescope was the very first one that could make faraway things look close and clear. But, interestingly, people didn't call it a telescope until later in
Artlist.io.
1611. So Hans Lippershey's invention was the first of its kind, and it changed how we see the world.
Touching sky.
Music
Telescope designed for
licensing
astronomy.
reimagined.
Johannes Kepler was a scientist who explained how telescopes, optics, the way light behaves, and light rays work. He made the first telescope designed specifically for astronomy. Instead of using mirrors or a
Artlist.io.
single lens like previous telescopes, Kepler's telescope had two lenses that bulged outward, called convex lenses. Kepler lived during the same time as Hans Lippershey and Galileo Galilei, so he heard about their inventions quickly. This allowed him to start experimenting with both their telescopes and his own.
Music
In
licensing
1611, just
reimagined.
3 years after the first telescope was made in the Netherlands, Kepler created his famous Keplerian telescope. The Keplerian telescope was different because it used a convex lens for the eyepiece, which let people see a much larger area and made it easier on the eyes. However, it also flipped the image upside down. This telescope could magnify objects more than the Galilean telescope, but it needed a much longer distance between the lenses. Some telescopes even have focal length,
Artlist.io.
the distance between the lenses, of 46 meters. A reflecting telescope is a special type of telescope that uses mirrors instead of lenses to make objects look bigger. It's sometimes called a catoptric telescope because it uses mirrors. In the 1600s, a man named Nicolas
Music licensing reimagined.
after meeting the famous astronomer Johannes Kepler. Around 1616, Zücki made the first version of a reflecting telescope. His telescope had a big bronze mirror to collect light and make the image, and a concave lens to look through. Zücki's telescope was the first to use a curved mirror to make an image. His work inspired other scientists like Gregory and Newton to make even better telescopes. In a book he wrote later, Zücki described how he used a concave
Artlist.io.
lens and a parabolic mirror to try and make a telescope. He did experiments to see if the mirror could focus the image well enough to see through the lens, like a telescope does.